afternoon. This is another Avolites training session. It's a sunny Friday, the 5th of June. It always seems to be sunny at the moment. I think I might have even said that the other day. Anyway, my name is Arran. I'm going to be doing an AI related session today. So don't worry if you're tuning in and you're just seeing the Google banner there at the moment. We are going to be doing AI related stuff. So today what I'm going to do, I am going to start a couple of sessions about 3D modelling and using 3D models and creating 3D models to use in your AI projects. So that could be as simple as your visualization model, or it could be as advanced. You might have seen in some of the tutorials I've used models to predetermine how my outputs are laid out. And we can even use them to make morphing stages, sort of dynamic projections, surfaces. We're not going to cover all that in one session, so in my brain I see this being probably 3 sessions, maybe 4. We're going to see how we go there. Okay, so I'm going to use a bit of free 3D software called Blender. Now, a lot of these principles will be applicable to different softwares, but obviously the way you do it in different softwares works a little bit differently. I like Blender. I've used it for quite some time. It's been around for years. There's a really good support community, and it does everything we need. Anyway, so blender.org is the place to go to. So it's open source freeware. It's great. Now, I'm actually not going to use the very latest version, and if I have time today, I'm going to show you why. There's a function I can't get to work in the latest version. So if we go to download, and we're going to go to previous versions, this tab here at the top, and then we click here on the right in this all previous versions section. There's every release is available for download, and we're actually going to take 2.79. so version 2.8 of Blender, it changed a little bit. I will show it to you, but 2.79 is what we're going to use. So you click on that, it will download. I'm not going to make you watch a download because I'm fairly confident that you've seen a download before. So I'm going to just open up Blender here. Let's just, okay, there we go. Now everything I'm going to show you, actually, although the interface is a little bit different on the newer Blender versions, it's almost everything is done exactly the same. Okay, so what I propose first of all, there's no point in us making a standard rectangle because we can easily do that in AI. So let's make something a little bit more fun. So what I'm going to do in this first simple today's session, we're going to make an array of LED panels or panels. We're going to apply our texture to it, and then we're going to export it and use it in AI. So first of all, I'm going to delete this cube. So this is the X button, and press delete. And I'm going to add a plane. So on the left here I've got this create, these tabs, and the second one down is create. And I'm going to press plane, and it gives me a plane there, a little 1x1 plane. Now I'm not going to change any of the dimensions of this. On the right here we've got these different tabs, and one of these would give us our object attributes. If I hold my mouse a bit longer, it will tell us. Anyway, let's not worry about that for now. What we're going to do, we're just going to make a simple, I'm going to make a 5x3 array of LED panels. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave gaps between each of the panels so that there's 15 separately placed panels, but we're going to make it so that our texture is spread as it should be, rather than just chopping the image up and spreading it out. We're going to account for those gaps that we see there. And the benefit of doing this all in sort of advance of, I mean, you can do all this with regions in AI, but doing it in advance is quite nice. It gives you a little bit more control in certain ways. It means you can also update show files just by simply changing a 3D model. You don't have to go in and redraw all your regions or change things like that, and it makes it very reliable for sort of touring shows where maybe the tech who's operating doesn't know every aspect of what makes a show, and you can just give them a model and you can know how it's going to address the outputs. Okay, so really useful little tool here. On the right, on these tabs, there's one that looks like a spanner or a wrench. If we click on there, this gives us modifiers. So if we click on the drop down menu, the one at the top is array. So this is going to make an array of panels for us. So we click on there, and immediately we see another panel come in. Now with Blender you can sort of change your working areas like that quite easily. So the important thing here, in fact I'm going to change my view a little bit. You can see that I've got a slightly strange angle view. If I hold in my middle mouse button I can rotate my view as I like, or if I hold shift and hold in the middle mouse I can actually pan the world as well. But in a 3D application you've got sort of preset views. So if we go down to the bottom left here, we've got a view menu, and I'm just going to go for top so that we're just nice and, there we go, nice and perpendicular to the panel so that we've got a flat, we can see the image in its two-dimensional form. Okay, so let's start playing with this array modifier. Now I'm going to use the relative offset. So you've got two options here. You can use a constant offset, and that is an absolute distance in numbers, or you can use relative, which uses the relative size of the panels, and I find relative works quite nicely for this purpose. Now when it's a relative value of 1, 1, it means that for every width of the panel there will be another panel. So actually my second panel is starting here. You can't see the gap at the moment. If I increase that, so I can either double click, and I can, in fact I think that was a single click, wasn't it? Yeah, single click, and I can type in a value, or I can use these arrows on the left and the right. If I put a relative value of 1, 1, it's going to give us a gap. Cool, so let's just make that a little bit bigger just so it's nice, 1.2. There we go. Okay, so I've got 2 panels, but actually I want 5. So now if I just, on the count bar here, I'm going to just click on the arrow and just add a few. Okay, so just zoom out with my mouse wheel there just to see what's going on. Okay, so I've got these 5 panels, but whilst we have this modifier, only the first panel is physical. These are just ghosts, I suppose you could call, of the original. Good afternoon, Menno. Good to have you with us. Yeah, so what we want to do before we do anything else, in fact, let's because we're going to add a second array. So an array is generally in one direction, and it could be a diagonal direction, for instance. So if I change that up, you can see that they could go like that. But I'm going to add another array which will work vertically. Now I do need to apply this first array first, otherwise my second array is only going to be a vertical column rather than arraying off of every object. So we can just press apply, and that's now become physical geometry. So let's add another array. This time I'm going to change, in fact if I zoom out a bit you can see that by default it's put it a second array of 5 just to the right of the first 5, and I don't want that. I want that to go vertically. So where we've been entering our array value, our relative offset, is in the X box. So let's put that, the X-axis box I should say, rather than the X box. So on my Y I'm going to change that, and I'm going to put that to 1.2. There we go. And then let's put that up there. So I've changed my count to 3, and that gives us that nicely shift and middle mouse to move to pan. There we go. That's given me that nicely made array of panels. So I mean obviously I could have just come in and I could have made planes. So you see whenever I make anything you get these handles. I'm just going to grab that. So I could have come in and I could have made a plane, and then I could copy and paste, or I could, in the tools menu you've got duplicate, and then you'd use your translate, that would move it around. But this array tool, this is much quicker and much easier and gives us a nice uniform size. I am sort of avoiding talking about sizing at the moment, because I'm going to talk about that in probably the next tutorial where sizing will be much more important. For now let's not think about sizing, but hopefully by the end of these sessions you'll be able to come in and you'll know that you're using panels of a particular physical size, and you can then know the physical size of the gaps and everything. It makes it much easier when you're doing more abstract shapes like this. You have to have a sort of a nice structure to support them, so it helps to be working to real measurements. Anyway, let's forget that for now. let me select my plane again. So I had deselected everything here, and this window on the right actually shows me all the objects within this current project, and so I just clicked on the plane there. In fact, what we'll do, let's give that a new name. Let's just double click on there, and let's call it LED panel. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we've got this object now. We've got our panels made out. Now before I apply my texture to this, and this is going to be the magic part, I actually want to center this up, and there are a few tools in here for repositioning this. You would reposition your handle to the center of the object. I'm actually just going to do this quite a lazy way and get it roughly in there. So now this is an important thing to remember. With AI, let's go back to our perspective view. With AI, our X is our left and our right, and our Y is our up and our down. However, in the bottom left corner, you've got this axis monitor, like so. So you'll notice that in Blender, X is left and right, and Y is backwards and forwards, and actually Z is up and down. And you can change your options when you export. It's just useful to be aware. You might sometimes get that 90-degree offset thing that you sometimes see. So what I'm going to do, let's rotate it round. Now, with a lot of the tools in Blender, there are keyboard shortcuts that are quite easy. So I know that if I want to rotate, I can press the R button. So for instance, press that and it's going to rotate around the center. If I right click or press escape, I can get out without applying it. If I press R, the letter R for rotate, followed by the axis on which I want to rotate, so in this case X, R, X, it will only rotate on that axis, which is kind of nice. Let's just escape out that one. But the best thing to do, I can type a value in. So I can do R, X, 90. Great. And then I press my left mouse button to accept that. So we've got it round on the correct axis. Now I want to get it centered as well, just to my world, just because I'm fussy like that. So let's do a front view like that. There we go. And so basically what I'm going to be looking for is this crossover of the blue, which is my X, my Y. Well, it's the Z in Blender, but it's my Y, and my red, which is my X. And I'm going to just use the handles and just move this object roughly until I'm there. Again, I could use the translate option here, but that will do me fine. I just want it roughly centered so that when I bring it into AI, it's going to sit nicely within my world. Okay, so that's our basic geometry, our physical surfaces built. Now we have to do the bit which seems like black magic until you understand how easy it is. So we're going to do UV mapping. So just to explain, when we say UV mapping, it sounds all sort of technical and weird, and actually all we're talking about is X, so left and right, and Y, up and down position within our image. And we actually just use U for X and V for Y, simply because in 3D terms, X and Y are used for physical position rather than relative texture position. They mean the same thing, X, Y, U, V, but it's just to differentiate between the two. Okay, so let's get a nice flat view of this, because I can see from my grid there in the background I'm a little bit off, and it's good to have a strong, solid point of view when you do the UV mapping. So let's just go view front, just to get back to there. Cool. Now, this one took me ages to find this the first time. What we're going to do is we're going to make a second window here, a second working window, and then on one side we're going to have our UV mapping, and then the other side we're going to see this physical geometry. Just at the top right of this window itself, there's a little, I'm kind of circling around it, it's quite small, some diagonal lines that cause a button, and when you hover your mouse over it, pointer turns into a cross. So I'm going to click and hold my left mouse button and just drag that over, like so. Okay. So we've now got 2 workspaces there, and we want one of these to be the UV editor. So we can do it on either side, doesn't matter. You'll see that at the bottom of each section there's this icon that looks like a white cube, and actually what that is a way to get to the different areas of your software. So the white cube is the 3D view, the one that we've been working in. We are going to use UV image editor, like so. Okay, so this is our default texture size, our texture area, and it's given to us in squares because actually more commonly in games people use squares because they want to optimize content, and it's not necessarily the way that we would work in the live show event. There are times where it is very sensible to optimize content, and I'm going to look at that I'm going to bring in some models that I've used on other shows in some of the sessions and have a look at that. So the first thing we want to do now, we want to change this texture size to something that's more useful to us. So this square, this is what in AI, when we have a fixture and we set the fixture resolution, we enter the fixture resolution in pixels, but actually it's about the relative ratio of the sizes. So when we do 1920 by 1080, what we're actually saying is ratio of 16 by 9. So this one here, for instance, this is actually, because it's a square, it's a ratio of 1, 1. And UVs are relative to the overall texture size that we set. So something that is positioned halfway across the UV map will always be in the halfway across the UV map, whether we change that resolution to 512 by 512 or 4096 by 4096, it will always hold its relative position, which is quite a nice handy thing. Anyway, we are going to use a 16:9 shape, and that's why I've chosen this 5:3, because 5 by 3 panels fits quite nicely into 16:9. It's not perfect, but it gets there pretty close. So, new texture. Down at the bottom, we've got a button with a plus icon, and it says new on it. I'm going to give that one a press, and we are actually going to specify this in pixels, but it doesn't matter as long as it's the correct ratio for our end screen. So I'm going to put 1920 by 1080. I could actually, like I say, that could actually say 192 by 108, or it could be 960 by 540. The result's going to be the same for our using of it. So I've made 2 entries there. I press OK. And don't be worried when you just see a black screen here, because what it does is it zooms in really far on the new texture. So using the mouse wheel, I'm going to zoom out. And you can see the good old familiar 16:9 screen that we work with there. This principle, obviously, it does totally work with any ratio and resolution. It's not limited to 16:9 in squares, but 16:9 seemed like a good place to start. Okay, so what we're going to do, this is going to create our map, our UV map, and it's going to basically tell the model which part of our image texture should be played on which part of the model. So to do this, we need to basically take these outlines and place them within this black area. So on the right side, and it's always worth remembering where your mouse is on this, especially if you use shortcuts, because some shortcuts change relative to the active window, and the active window is defined as where your mouse currently is. On the right, we are going to go down to this drop down here which says Object Mode, and we're going to choose Edit Mode. So obviously we need to be able to edit this model to adjust its UV mapping, so it's an edit function. So let's go into Edit Mode. Now before I do that, in fact, whilst we're in Object Mode, right clicking, if I press A to deselect all, right clicking on an object will select an object, and you can see that at the moment all of this is being selected as one object. Now what I will do a bit later, I'm going to split it up, and it's best to do this part at once. So there are some workarounds, but generally speaking, in Blender, when you're trying to UV map a group of objects, it's much easier to group them and map them as a single object and split them up rather than doing them one at a time. Anyway, so let's go into our edit mode. Cool. And then we need to choose our type of editing. So at the moment, when I use the right button to select, and I'm wondering if I haven't applied my original modifier there. There we go. I need to go back out and see object to do that. There we go. That's why it was only giving me that bottom row. So when we go in here, you'll see that when I right click, we're just selecting vertices at the moment. So there's 3 different components that we can select here. We've got vertices, the points at the corner, and that's what we use for things like the mapping editor in AI. So this is a really nice way of defining the complexity of your control in your mapping editor. We've got edges as well, and we've got faces. Now I'm going to work with faces for this because I think this works best. So down the bottom here, you've got 3 buttons. One is more visible and the other 2 are a little greyed out. So the one on the left is the selected one, and you can see it's got a point, and that is because it is vertex mode. So for face mode, we want the 3rd one. You can see it's got a large face shown in orange. So now you see I can right click on each object. I think I can shift click, yep, and I can go through them like that. Or if I press A will deselect all and then select all, and it will just keep doing as long as you keep pressing it. So making sure that they are all selected with my A button. I can see they're selected by the colours all being in orange. What I'm now going to press, I'm going to press U for UV map. So that's U on the keyboard, U for umbrella. And it gives us this little pop-up here. Now I'm going to look at some of the other types on some of the other lessons, but what we are going to do, because I've chosen a layout that is going to pretty much fit in this texture area over here on the right, I'm going to use project from view. You've got 2 there, project from view and project from view bounds. Both project from view and project from view bounds should respect the aspect ratio of the pieces we're copying over. Project from view bounds will try and make it as large as possible within this texture area without it going over the edges. I actually have a preference to, I prefer project from view. So let's choose project from view. And so you can see now that it's added these panels in here, and what this is meaning, if this was a full HD film we're playing, it would mean that we'd see this part of this overall video playing on this first panel, and this part of this overall video on the second panel, and so on. Now obviously, to me, that's a load of wasted texture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just scale it up. So I could have used that project from view. In fact, let's have a look at the differences. But this is another good shortcut moment. S for scale, S for sugar. Press that and it attaches to the mouse, and then I can just pull that backwards and forwards until I find it's about the right size. I'm going to go for that, and then I'm going to click with my left mouse button to apply that. So I think it needs to come down a little bit. I'm going to just zoom in with my mouse. There we go. I think that overall those areas need to come down a bit, because I like it to be sort of evenly bordered where possible, because it will make your image sit more nicely on your screen model. So there are a few ways you could do this. We could use the, if I press the plus, there we go. I could use the translate tool. I'm going to just move that out of the way. I could use the arrow key, stuff like that. Again, we can do shortcuts here. Now this one is slightly less intuitive. Maybe I've just thought of a way. So to translate, we press G. Maybe think of it as G for grab. So this is going to be, let's just press G. So if you remember the rotation, it's a bit like the rotation. When I just press G, I can move it everywhere. So I could sort of get it roughly in there actually, if I'm totally honest. But the thing I wanted to show is, again, you can do the axis trick on this one. So if I do G and Y, it will only move on that up-down axis. So I can get it to a place that I'm happy, and give that a left click. Then I'm going to do GX, just to get my horizontal position in there a bit better. There we go. Okay. So what we've done, we've made our surfaces, and now we're telling the surfaces which part of our overall texture will appear on each of those panels. Now I want to do one more thing to this. I actually want to separate this. In fact, let's do two versions. Let's get rid of this window first of all, because I don't need both of them now. Ooh. If I drag over, when you see that arrow, you can just let go. There you go. Let's go back to my 3D view. And let's go on to object mode. Okay, cool. So, let's export this first of all. So we're going to go File, and we're going to go Export, and we're going to go 3D Studio. Let's find a location that we want to put these. I'm going to put these onto my desktop. Let's call this first one Panels as 1, because I'm going to do this one and then I'm going to split it up as well and just show you the difference when I take it in. Panels as 1.3ds. Now here we can change our axes, the default axes. So I'm going to do that, and I think we want up, we want our Y up. Forward, I'm just trying to think if we want Z forward or Z minus Z forward. I'm going to go for minus Z forward. If it's wrong, it's wrong. We'll know for next time. Okay, so we're going to export 3ds like so. So all I want to do now, I just want to split this one up into multiple panels as well, because that's quite a useful thing to do there. So let's just bring that over a little bit. So we're going to see some things getting added into here. I'm just going to make the window a little bit bigger so that we can see anything. There we go. So if I go back into object mode, we're on face mode, which is great, and they're all selected. If you press P for press, in fact, that gives us the separate option. And if we separate by loose parts, what it's going to do, rather than us having a single object, we're going to end up with 15 different objects all within the model file. And there's a few ways this can be useful to us in AI. So, P by loose parts and select that. There we go. So you can see now that it's done all of those for me. Now what I want to check, I think it's done the right thing. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to, because it's actually numerically numbered those, I'm going to just change that first panel name just so that it is in line with that, because that was quite nice. Let's call it 000. There we go. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to export. In fact, let's go back out to object mode. There we go. Let's go to export 3D Studio. It's retained my previous settings from the axes, so even if I've got it flipped round wrong, we're going to be the same as the other one. Let's call this one multiple panels, multiple parts. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go export 3ds. Okay, so I'm going to close Blender down and I'm going to start up AI. Here we go. And so, as I say, I'm going to have a couple of other sessions coming up on this. I am going to look at creating 3D objects and unwrapping those. So some people struggle a little bit with applying texture to a three-dimensional object and unwrapping it in a way that's workable. I've just totally realised I missed a step out there. Let us open up Blender. Ah, there we go. So the thing I forgot to do there. So we've got this area now. Now ideally we want to be able to give, if we go back to our UV editor. In fact, I'm going to Z back, because now I've made it. There we go. I've made it into loads of objects, and I slightly complicated my world there. Oh my goodness, and now I'm pressing the wrong button. There we go. Let's go back into our so I'm going to go back into the UV editor, so I'm going to select all my panels first, and I've gone back to there and there. Oh, that moment where I should have just done something on the spot there. There we go. Object, edit, there we go. Let's go to our UV image editor. There we go. That's not showing me the right page. Let's do that. I should have shown you how to make a template. There we go. Project from view, scale that up again. There we go. Okay, so I realise now that I've changed all my settings, they're not going to be the same. I should have gone a few steps back. That was panic mode engaged. What I wanted to show you, if you do UVs, once you've set everything up, if you do UVs and export UV layout, let's go to my desktop again. This is going to create a PNG version of our UV layout. There we go. So if I very quickly load up something like Paint, there we go. We open that file, template. You see what it's done. It's actually given us a layout, and this would be applicable to any 3D model we make. And so normally what I would do, I would come in and I would probably do that, and I like to have different color panels, sort of like so. I'm doing a very rushed job here. Well, we're going to go with that one. Let's say there. There we go. And we could then export that. We could even probably add text to that. We could add labels like 1, 2, 3, 4 or A1, A2. It's all about being able to share your layout with other people. So we could then supply this to the content makers, and they could know that if they make content that runs exactly along this point, they're going to know exactly where it's going to fall on the 3D model. Anyway, let's get back to AI and actually bring those models in. Okay, so let's go to our stage construction page, and then let us clear that one. There we go. So I've got my models. I'm actually just going to drag them straight in from my desktop here. So we had, what do we have? Panels as one. So that's our one where everything is in there as a thing. Now, the thing we want to change here, so normally we set our scale width and our scale height to whatever we want the screen to be, but we've made the screen to the correct proportions. So we can put those as 1, 1 here. Then we've got our 1920 by 1080 represents our overall texture ratio that we had. So if you remember, I said we could put any 16:9 ratio resolution in there. I'm going to just make sure that we've got a test pattern. We have. There we go. Lovely. Let's just show canvas. Cool. So you can see that we made this nice sort of panel arrangement, and it takes into account the gaps that are in there. So we don't have to have special content that's made for... You can play special content and it'll look great, but you can play any sort of standard content on here. This is where I realise I have no real content on this laptop. There we go. So let's just throw that on there, for instance. You can see it sort of works as you'd expect it to work. So, the reason I've made two versions of this, let's go back to a test pattern just to make our life easier. If we're using this for projection mapping, there we go. Let's just bring a projector in there very, very roughly and quickly. There we go, and we go to the output page. And let's turn an output on there. We just bring that up a bit as well. Let me just change that to a full screen. There we go. Output page, there we go. So, this is the model where everything is as one. In fact, if I'd been sensible there, I could... No, I'd have to go back there anyway. So yeah, this is our model that we've brought in where everything is a single model, a single piece. Although they're separate geometric shapes, they're a single object within the file. So in this particular case, it's not too bad. We can quite easily select the parts we want. Let's just grab those two for now, and let's move them around a bit. There you go. So you can see we've got that sort of control that we've got. Now, on some really complex mapping jobs, you might want it so that you're just looking at single components at a time. So if we go back to our other model, and I'm just going to bring that model in, so that's multiple parts, just drop it onto the same screen fixture. It's going to look the same at the moment, which is fine because that's how I set it to be. If we select the screen fixture, we can see here both of the models in there, and we're going to make sure we've got multiple parts selected. So now when we go to our output page and we go to the projector output page, you'll see that currently I can only select the vertices that are on the specified panel. As I say, on this particular setup, it's not really necessary because there's not a lot that's overlapping. It's all on a single plane rather than being three-dimensional, so it's much easier for us to select. But it does then mean that you can use things like, we have this remove object tool here in AI, and so let's say that I was doing this as projection, and I was doing it from a couple of projectors, and I wanted this projector to only show those left 9. Because we've saved it as separate parts, we can use the remove object button, and we can then use the next object button to find the next one that we want to remove. There we go. Like so. And so you couldn't do this particular function. You can't do the remove object function if it's all a single object. So another benefit, last but not least, to saving it as multiple parts, if you're creating your screen structure like that, and so Alex, I totally agree that the new version of Blender is really good, but I challenge you to get it to respect your aspect ratio. In fact, I'll show you in a second the issue that it has. But Alex has popped up and said that he recommends using 2.83. I'll show you. So let me just do this last bit first. So now if I use that, on the right we've got this function on the screen fixture where we can basically create screen regions from our geometry. So the nice things here of doing it with a 3D model, it's automatically taken the names that I gave the objects in the piece, and because we've saved it as separate pieces, every region that comes in here now is separately addressable, which is cool. Right, let me jump out of here because I did promise that I would tell you why I'm not using 2.8 for this. So if I very quickly jump into 2.8 of Blender here, let us just delete that. Let's add a plane. The interface is a little bit different. It's nice though. Let us go to our UV editing page. Let's go to new texture. If I set a non-squared texture, Blender has issues basically. So I've got a 1920 by 1080 texture. You'll see that whatever I do, my square is never going to be shown as a square here. So let's do that. So even if I go, let's go view, viewport top. If I go U and I go for project from view, it's always going to come in as a rectangle, and this is an issue with the way that Blender 2.8 works in relation to 2.7. So normally the way you fix this in 2.7, when you press U to bring up your like project from view, you get a box that appears here. So correct aspect, I'm never sure whether having it ticked should be that the aspect is correct, or whether having it ticked means it will correct the aspect. But either way, one of those options should, and if we go in there, let's just select the object and show you in that window as well. This is another weird thing I see, but it doesn't change it. Whereas if I go into 2.79 and we do U project from view correct aspect, you can see here that in 2.79 that function works. So when it's ticked, the aspect is correct in relation to the object, but when it's unticked, it is not. Now obviously the sort of cure you could do for this is you could scale everything. So you could do scale on the X by 0.5625, but that's not going to be 100% accurate, which is why I don't like it. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day on the functionality of the newest version of Blender. Everything else in the newest version of Blender is awesome, but that doesn't work properly, and if you're just making screen surfaces, in my opinion, do it in 2.7, because it works. But that's a personal preference. Anyway, good afternoon to Karai there as well. I'm very sorry you popped in a few minutes ago. I only spotted you now. So, I'm going to call it a day there, pretty much. Hopefully, this has been made some sense. I didn't go too complex and too in depth on this one because I thought let's start easy, get you used to the concepts, the idea of texture space versus physical geometry, and so I haven't really thought about what sessions I'm going to... Good afternoon, Brad. Glad it's of use. So over the next few sessions, I'm going to look at a few things. So we're going to make 3D objects. That's going to be the next obvious step. And we're going to show you how to unwrap those. We are going to look at making models that can be loaded directly into the output page in AI, which creates regions in exactly the place and size that you want. They're great for a tour. You can just send someone a model and tell them to load the model, and you know that everything is going to be perfectly as you've programmed it. I'm going to have a look at things like maybe making models for morphing. I could probably do that on the 3D models one, actually. And I'm also going to have a look at using products like MyStrip. So MyStrip is a particular brand. It's a video product, and generally it shows 128 pixels by 1 pixel. You get a lot of variations on this theme now. But quite commonly you'll see people using them in a circular configuration on, say, the floor of a game show, a television show. But in reality you want a load of straight lines on your output because no LED processor will happily work with circles. It likes ups and downs. So I'm going to show you some really nice ways to do stuff like that, and you can use this technique to do really crazy, complex. Think of things like Eurovision, where they have weird three-dimensional LED structures of rods and beams and stuff. I'm going to show you the technique that we use to make it really easily in 3D and convert it so that you can just load it straight into your outputs. Anyway, on that note, I am going to stop talking at you for the day. I am going to probably... I'm working on a whole new set of AI Academy videos at the moment. I'm going to do some new versions for all the modelling stuff as well. But it's a slightly different feel to the webinars, so we'll leave these in the webinars and we'll group them all together. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in on this fine day. Don't forget that if you do want to know more, you can go over to our website, avolites.com/online resources. We put our schedules up there. The new schedule will either be at the end of today or tomorrow. Good afternoon, Johan. Yeah, so we're just going to keep keeping on. As I said, I'm going to concentrate on modelling a lot over the next few weeks, and I'm going to try and do a few more sessions of bringing in external techniques and stuff like that are useful in the wider world. And a lot of the modelling stuff as well, if you use things like capture or visualizers of any kind, this will help you to create your own sort of staging components and stuff like that and really make your world look special. So without further ado, I am going to stop talking at you, and I will see you all next time. Thank you very much.